Hi everyone, Grant K here for the Smoke Learning channel. In this video, I'd like to share a few tips concerning motion blur in action. The first tip has to do with applying selective motion blur to various 3D objects in the 3D composite. Now, when you enable motion blur through the Action Node Preferences menu, the motion blur setting is applied to every object in the 3D composite. So scrub to the middle of the composite with the time bar and press the preview button. The previewed image shows the motion blur applied to all the objects in the scene. Now let's say for argument's sake that I didn't want motion blur on this object. Ensure you can see the action schematic in a viewer and select the axis of this particular surface. This axis transformation node is what drives the movement of the 3D object in the composite. So with the axis node selected, switch to the Object menu. Here you will find a motion blur button that is specific to this axis. It is enabled by default. If you turn this button off and press Preview again, you will see that the 3D object no longer has any motion blur. So you start off with everything having motion blur, and then you selectively disable the axis nodes to cancel the motion blur for specific objects. I'll just ensure that motion blur is on for every object. The next motion blur tip is a time-based one. Select an axis in the schematic and scrub back to the first frame. Press the Preview button. Now the first frame of the composite is very interesting when it comes to motion blur. For example, if you wanted to start the composite in the middle of a move. Motion blur is determined by looking at the previous and next frame. However, being on frame 1, there isn't a previous frame to calculate the motion blur. But you can still switch to the Animation menu and tweak a few settings to make this happen. Locate the highlighted axis channels from the selection. Looking at the curve, you will see that the movement is flat before frame 1. This basically means that before frame 1, there isn't any movement to calculate motion blur. So keep the channels selected and change the extrapolation from constant to linear. So the animation will happen before frame 1. If you now ensure you are on frame 1 and press the Preview button, you will now get continuous motion blur even on frame 1. I hope that these tips have been helpful. Comments, feedback and suggestions are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the Smoke Learning channel for future videos.